doing the pledge, you know, at the beginning of the meeting. Did you go away from Memorial Day?
No. For the past 2 weekends, I've been doing hard labor.
Where, up at the house?
Yes. Putting in, we have a huge vegetable garden, and we have groundhogs that get into everything. So we basically built raised beds. It was already fenced, or we had to fence the bottom because they can burrow it. So
Right.
the entire, and it's huge. It's a fence on the bottom.
Huh.
We're ready.
Oh, so you laid that down, and now you're putting the soil on top, and
And then I have recycling some more bricks to do for
huh? It is, especially with how hot it was, I guess, last weekend.
I must have lost 5 pounds. Like the best way. Who needs to go to the gym? All right, I'm ready. We're recording.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Is he recording in the back?
This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. Due notice of this meeting, in accordance with the New Jersey Public Opens Meeting Act, has been provided by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of this building, and also by sending a copy to the newspaper designated for the township. Electronic notice is also posted on the township website. This meeting is being broadcast live on Channel 34 and is available and will be available on demand on YouTube. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board has powers and procedures resembling a court of law, and we're obligated to objectively determine facts and to draw conclusions in order to provide the basis for official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues that the board may legally consider in reaching such decisions, and decorum appropriate for a judicial hearing is required to be maintained at all times. Members of the public will be allowed to make comment and ask questions at appropriate times during hearings, and until given that indication, the board expects that the public will be courteous and allow us to conduct business. At this point, we have, first thing on our agenda is our roll call, and I am here.
Vice Chair Brodock.
I'm here.
Mr. Graham.
Here.
Mr. Ianwali.
Here.
Ms. Lockman. Here. Mr. Pierre.
Present.
Ms. Schlager is, or Councilor Schlager is excused. Ms. Willis. Mr. Jacobson.
I'm here.
Mr. Neiman.
Here.
Okay. We have a quorum.
Okay. We've got several resolutions. The first one, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. We have the minutes from our April 11th and our May 9th meetings. So April 11th first.
I received changes from Carmel and Keith for the April 11th minutes. Are there any additional changes? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. And
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. And then I have the minutes from the May 9th meeting, and I do know we had some amendments to those minutes from Keith. Is there a motion to?
And Ms. Lockman.
Oh, okay, and Ms. Lockman. Are there any further changes?
Just one question. It says we eliminated this section where it says electronic notice of the meeting was provided. I thought electronic notice was provided. Am I mixing up?
It might have been, but we didn't have to since it was an electronic meeting.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So that's why I struck that, but. I mean,
Okay.
if we
I
did-
have no objection to
It's
striking it.
not an electronic meeting, but it's posted on the website.
Right, and I think that's what the note said, that electronic notice was provided, not that it was an electronic meeting,
Right.
right? So I don't know if,
Do you want to keep just that part and remove the?
I'd be comfortable with that. yeah.
Posting the meeting instructions on the main access door? Like, I feel like we probably don't do that anymore.
No.
Yeah, this is probably nitpicky, but yeah, I'm
That's
happy doing
okay.
that, Keith. Yeah,
Nitpick. I mean,
absolutely.
We get into the weeds on the minutes.
Let's
so
do it. Let's
Go
do
for
it.
it. So we'll
Okay.
keep that phrase.
All right.
Are there-
And
Oh, I'm not in the role, and I was there.
My apologies.
That's okay.
He was sitting right next to me, I saw him.
I must have cut and pasted the names from a different set of minutes, so I'm sorry.
No worries.
All right, I will add your name. All right, any other changes? A motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Now for the resolutions. First one up is Label Street Study redevelopment, area designation.
Just because, Mr. Chair, because there were some proposed revisions circulated around, I think it might make sense to table that resolution till the next meeting and let our council kind of try to synthesize the comments and put it off to the next meeting.
I'm merely the interpreter of what the.
No, it's mostly, I'm suggesting it mostly because we didn't post the, I mean, there's like different resolutions that were circulated among the board. I figured that it might make sense to,
Why don't we do this? Why don't we just shift this discussion to the back end of the meeting? And then we'll go from there.
okay.
And with that, then we'll move on to the resolution for Jonathan Goidel at 264 Upper Mountain Avenue.
I think there was, Keith, you had one change on page 4, which is, you suggest that remove that section
Yeah,
about the,
Paragraph 5, page 4.
yes. Yep. Yeah, take off that last sentence.
okay,
And then there were a couple other minor changes throughout.
because that'll be worked out when they actually have their house design.
Correct.
Yes.
Like, I don't want to tie that,
I
the
think it's-
size of the pipe, because
Right.
he did say it was conceptual.
Are we talking about Tylek or the?
Goidel.
Goidel, okay,
Yep.
sorry. I thought I heard M&M.
Janice, I had some changes that I think Keith worked on the document that I had
Okay.
given you, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just because you mentioned just Keith
It's
had
both of you,
changes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Just-
Any other changes? Motion to approve?
so moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
And then we have one more.
Yes, this is a resolution to grant a one-year extension on the site plan approval for M&M Tylek at 182 Glenridge Avenue. Is there a motion to approve?
So
With
moved.
Carmel's edit of this was the maximum amount allowable by law?
That's what we're looking at, right? I think
Is
both-
that version, or?
I didn't see, well,
I didn't see that.
Sorry, I didn't see that in the resolution. I saw that in the minutes, but not in the resolution.
Oh,
I
don't
saw in the
have-
resolution.
I may be getting them mixed up. Yeah,
A
okay.
change from, in the second paragraph, a change from the word approval to site.
Right.
I think
Oh,
makes
okay.
perfect sense.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right, so is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
All right, and that brings us to application for this evening for 189, 191 Glenridge Avenue.
Sorry, can I just ask a question? Is Carol Willis still on the board?
Excuse me?
Is Carol Willis still on our board?
Yeah, she's still.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear you say that
Oh,
she
yeah.
was, yeah.
I just, she didn't tell me that she wasn't gonna be able to make it tonight, but I did call her name. Okay.
Okay. Good evening, Counselor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. It's really nice to see everyone live and in person.
Hey,
It's
2
been a
years
while.
later, you still look the same.
Not really. I don't feel the same. You all do, but it's nice to be back and to see you all like I said, live. So, and for the record, Alan Trembulac, appearing on behalf of the applicant Essex Restaurant Group, LLC. This is an application for amended site plan approval to permit the construction of a small, approximately 225-foot addition onto the building located at 189-191 Glenridge Avenue, which is the location of the bar/restaurant formerly known as the Crosby. As most of you probably know, the restaurant has been closed during the pandemic and has been undergoing renovations, which will hopefully be completed within the next few months, at which time a new restaurant will open with a different name and a different cuisine, which my client will discuss in a couple of minutes. And again, we're here tonight because the applicant is seeking to construct this modest addition onto the westerly side of the building. The purpose of the addition is to provide a utility room and also a wine storage room. There'll be no change whatsoever in the seating capacity of the restaurant. The restaurant will contain exactly the same number of seats as the prior restaurant/bar as per this board's approval from 2015. Consequently, obviously, we're not seeking any variances, including any parking variances or any change or modification whatsoever regarding parking. And as most of you will recall, the board's prior resolution required that the applicant provide valet parking. My client is prepared to continue and comply with the resolution and provide valet parking. We're aware that the police department has some concerns about valet parking and whether it's even required, given the fact that directly across the street from the restaurant is a new parking deck, which will hopefully open sometime soon, which I think contains close to perhaps 300 parking spaces. My client is prepared to continue the valet parking, as I indicated, and if the board wants to relieve him of that obligation, he's willing to do that also. Again, we're not here for any change whatsoever regarding parking, just approval for this small addition. I have two witnesses to present. My first witness will be Gregory Dellermo, who's the owner of the restaurant, and then following him will be Jackson Banks from Sionis Architecture. So, if I can have Mr. Dellermo sworn in.
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Yeah, it's Gregory Dellermo, and
Can you
it's
speak into the microphone?
Gregory Dellermo, and it's Essex Restaurant Group, LLC. I'm the sole owner.
Do you want me to mark the exhibits before we start?
Mm-hmm.
A1 is the application, A2 is the certification of taxes paid, A3 is the proof of publication, A4 is the affidavit of service, A5 is the site plan prepared by Sionis Architecture dated March 10th, 2022. A6 is the HPC Consultants Report dated March 10th, 2022. That's the date on the memo. I don't think that's the actual date that he prepared it, but. A7 is the planning report dated April 14th, 2022. A8 is the police department report dated April 29th, 2022. A9 is the parking utility email dated May 6th, 2022. And A10 is the updated planning report dated June 1st, 2022.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Dellermo, I think you indicated that you're the sole owner of the Essex Restaurant Group, LLC.
Correct.
And is that LLC a tenant of the building located at 189-191
Yes.
Glenridge Avenue?
Yeah.
Okay. And was Essex Restaurant Group also the owner and operator of the Crosby Restaurant and Bar formerly located in that building?
Yes.
Okay. By the way, is the owner of the property aware of this application?
Correct.
And has the owner consented to the filing of the application?
Yes.
Okay. And as a condition of the board's approval, if the application is approved, we would provide written confirmation of the owner's consent. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So is it correct to say that the building on this property is currently being renovated and that you have plans to open a new restaurant at this location?
Correct.
Okay. Would you take a few minutes and tell the board about your plans for the new restaurant?
Yeah. So what I'm doing in the space is I want to make a steakhouse. So I'm renovating to make it more of a dining experience than the Crosby was. So it's going to be, the decor is going to be different in a sense. Nothing fancy or anything, and nothing that's not fancy. So it's going to be similar to the decor, but different. And I relocated the bathrooms. I did a couple things to make the flow of the place, the people, the customers, be able to walk easier throughout the whole restaurant. So I have a new chef. It's going to be a new menu. There's going to be, affordable things on the menu to the better steaks that are out there. So it's going to have a wide range of price point. I believe my chef is really good, so I believe the food's going to be good. So it'll be more of a dining experience.
Okay. We still have the bar located in the front of the restaurant?
Yeah, still have the bar. I'm going to be putting tables that are regular dining tables that are going to be part of the dining room and the bar area. So it's going to be more of a dining experience.
And the application that we've submitted to this board is to construct an addition to the existing building?
Correct.
Is that correct? Can you talk about the purpose of the addition and, where it will be located?
Yeah. So being that I'm doing the steakhouse, it requires a big wine list normally. So I'm going to, where before with the Crosby, we had wines on the menu, but not a whole big wine list. So with that said, I need space to store. So there's really nothing in the dining room area. If I did build something, it would just, the flow of the place would be ruined. So the addition includes that wine storage, and then there's a mechanical room that sits, when you walk in to the left side of my bar, that to walk by and wait staff and stuff to get by on the left side of the bar, it's very tight. So what I'm actually doing is, and Jackson will show, that the existing mechanical room will just be moved outside in the driveway area, free up that space along the left side, which if he shows you the diagram, you'll see what I'm talking about. It's much safer that way in case there's ever a fire or anything in there, that people can get out from the left side of the bar. They could come from the back corner of the restaurant and walk around that way if they had to. So it makes sense. It's not in a good spot where it is now, the mechanical room. So those are the two things.
Okay. And will there be any change in the seating capacity of the restaurant?
No.
Okay. You'll have the same
There's
number of seats?
There's no need to me to put more seats in there. There's enough.
Okay. And you're obviously aware that the board's prior approval resolution from 2015 required that you provide valet parking service?
Correct.
Okay, and are you prepared to continue to provide
Continue
valet
or not,
parking?
whatever the board would like.
All right, you'd have no objection if the board wanted to relieve you of that obligation?
No, I think, I think it would work as long as there's adequate parking on the metered spots and into the, the decks that are in the vicinity.
Okay. I think that's all I have for Mr. Dellermo, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. When you were first started, when you were talking about the bar area, you said that you were adding tables, or you were putting different tables in?
Different kinds of tables, yeah. Before we had, they call them commune tables. They're kind of similar like this, but they're higher up, and there was
And they're long,
Very
and everybody sits?
or stand around it. So now what I'm doing, I'm just I'm just putting it, I think Jackson might have it on the diagram, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Will show that I'm putting regular tables.
So same number of seats in the
Yeah.
bar area, just a different configuration?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I don't have any other questions. What about the rest of the
I
board?
just have one question. Will there be any increase in your staff with the change in the type of
I
restaurant?
don't believe so. We always had a big, pretty decent-sized staff that handled that place. I know what it takes. I don't think I'm gonna need anything more than I did before.
You still get to ask stupid newbie questions. The valet parking issue is one on which our police department has opined. So can we as a board basically say that we defer, in other words, we require valet parking unless he's relieved of that obligation by the police department? In other words, can we defer to them, or do we have to make the decision ourselves?
We can do a couple of different things. If we think that there's adequate grounds, I believe that we can modify our opinion or as to what we required of them the last time, but that would require that the board agree that there's, or at least a majority of the board agree, that there's adequate.
I was only asking what we can do.
No, and, right, and the, in as far as the adequate grounds go, this is kind of the first that I'm hearing about whatever the police department has said, so, I would need to know more, personally, I would need to know more about that right now. I guess while we're talking about it too, it would seem to make sense to me without knowing more about the situation, that we should at least allow time for the parking deck to get up and operating and to make sure that it's actually functioning in the manner that we think that it's going to function once it's fully operational before we would consider pulling back on that parking requirement, since the residents and the businesses along that stretch had complained about congestion and parking in the past. So,
Because we heard a little about this at the DRC, but our planner had asked Lieutenant Frisano to come, and she didn't. So we all need to hear more about.
She's here.
Oh, she's here. Ah, sorry. Sorry. I was going to say I have a poll between me and you. So sorry about that. But so that may be worth doing.
I just want to point out that, just remember, it's a condition of the prior approval, and this is the.
we would have to go back and change that prior approval, which we can do.
Right, this would supersede it, so it's an opportunity to say, yeah, to
But
change it.
while we're discussing it, if the lieutenant wouldn't mind coming up, and while we're on the subject, we might as well explore it.
Mr. Tremblay, do you have any objection to
No,
this
not at all.
testimony?
Yeah, we're here at the light.
Is the light on?
You know, object to the police.
Okay.
Well, considering you brought it up, Mr. Chairman. So-
Will you please tell us your name for the record, please?
Yes, Lieutenant Stephanie Agnes. The Montclair Police Department, traffic bureau.
In all honesty, I don't know if I need to swear you or not. I'm going to do it anyway.
No problem.
It's not on?
I don't think the mic is on. Talk. Now is it on?
Yep. Oh, there you are.
Now I can hear myself. Okay.
That's good.
All right, so put that hand up, and
Yes.
do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And would you again please state your name for the record?
Lieutenant Stephanie Agnezzo, Montclair Police Department, Traffic Bureau Commander.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, just tell us what you think and what your opinion is and what you base it on.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So I had an opportunity just to weigh in a little bit on our position from the traffic safety standpoint, from the parking. Our concern is that with this, the prior site plan approval for this location, I understand that it was a condition of the site plan approval to provide the valet parking service. And I do want to say that the owner really did try to make it work. We ended up with a lot of traffic issues. I don't know whether it was because of the valet service they used or we were there a lot to try to resolve these issues. The biggest problems were, if it wasn't set up properly, they had to purchase meters. I believe it was Janice, Miss Talley, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I think it was Thursday through Sunday. I think it was a
Yes.
certain number of days
Yeah, it was.
throughout the week, which they did, because again, it was a requirement. So it required, posting of no parking signs to reserve those spaces. If those spaces were occupied at the time, we did have the ability to ticket and tow those vehicles, but in the meantime, the valet service would run, and it caused problems with vehicles that were coming up to take advantage of that service that were double parked. The road is not, it's a little bit of a narrower road. There is restricted parking on the eastbound lane. And because of that, we ended up with a lot of traffic, dangerous traffic situations where cars that were just trying to go westbound on Glenridge Avenue were going head-on with other traffic. That was one issue. The other issue was they had a couple of different locations that they were required to use for the valet parked cars. And we ended up having, some of it we just came upon, just knowing, seeing where they were parking the cars. They weren't using those locations because they were further away. So they were also just taking up, they were taking spaces on the street. I believe, Ms. Talley, one of the locations they were supposed to be using was where the new building is at Glenridge
Right.
and North
which is-
Willow.
That was
right?
one of their original locations, right?
So that is no longer available to use. So the issue is going to become, where are they going to put these valet cars, the cars that they have to park? Another issue was the valet employees were cutting through, one of the locations they were using was up on North Fullerton, and they were cutting through private properties from Forest Street to get to these. So we got complaints about that. It just kind of ended up being a lot of issues. The biggest thing for us is the traffic safety issue. Obviously, we don't want head-on collisions. There's going to be a lot of people walking around. It just brought a little bit more of a problem than a solution. And I don't want to speak, improperly on that site plan approval, but I thought it said that once the parking deck was completed, that either it would be revisited or it could be eliminated. But I don't want to speak out of context. Now that the parking deck is almost open, I know that there's a little bit more that they're trying to get until that does open up. It would be nice to be able to use that instead of requiring a valet parking service.
Sounds like the problem was the valet parking service wasn't doing their job. Based on
It's
everything that you've
possible.
said, they were at the
Yes.
root of
Yes.
each one of those problems.
I could comment on it, and she's exactly right the way she explained it. The problem was, when we had the parking on, you said North Fullerton?
Yes, there was one lot that they were
Yeah,
using up on North Fullerton.
Up
Yeah.
around the block. By the time the valet walked all the way around to Bloomfield Avenue and all the way down to get the car there, it didn't make sense. So they were cutting through to get there faster. And then when there was complaints, we stopped cutting through, and they stopped using that lot because it just didn't make sense. You would need 20 guys to go and retrieve a car, and 15 minutes later, he'd be back with the car. Because then he'd have to go around the corner, and by the time he got back, that lot did not make sense anymore. So then I think that started the problem where they were parking on the street and, parking wherever they could. In the surface lot across the street at night, there's not that many cars there, they started using that. And she's correct about the traffic in front of the restaurant, because what would happen was we had a valet line
Right.
that was coned
Cute.
off. But half my customers come by Uber when they're drinking. So you have the valet line, and then the Uber drivers or someone that's dropping off someone there would stop in front of the door, and it's double cars. So they would stop in the middle of the street, Uber. The place is a busy place, so there's a lot of Ubers that actually drive around the area and wait, especially, when it comes time at the end of the night to go home, and, when people are going to a restaurant at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So there's a lot of activity besides the valet, with people coming up and dropping off.
So you need traffic control.
So I've talked to the chief about it back when we first opened up, and I said, if you ever need traffic, want to hire traffic, because they can't work for my place, they can work as traffic for part-time, but he never said, he never told me or never called me to say that he needed it. So, I'm willing to do either or.
Well,
She's right, she's 100% right.
I hear you, and it sounds like your valet parking, whoever you was hired for that, wasn't doing their job like they should have been.
The first company, well, we had another lot that we put cars in, it was the YMCA. After a certain time, we utilized the YMCA, which they did.
Mhm.
But,
Of course, when you brought the original application, and when the testimony came in, to the best of my recollection, we questioned about there being changes because we knew there was going to be development in that area, and we were assured that as some parking lots went offline because they were going to be built on, that there were adequate resources. And that was the reason why we allowed the parking variance, that we were assured that there were going to be adequate resources that the parking could do outside of the parking deck that would handle that without creating problems for the area. So that was part of the condition, and it sounds like there was a problem with meeting that condition.
Well,
But in any case, I think we can, the board, we can discuss it as a part of this, application, but.
Just for the record, I spent $2,500 a month on the parking.
But you didn't have enough parking to establish that business. You didn't have enough parking for that business without our variance, without us granting a variance. All right? So, however much you spent, that was the cost of doing business at that location.
Correct.
Because you need to park your clientele, just like every other business needs to be able to park their
Correct.
clientele.
I understand
So-
the process, I understand that.
So I can appreciate the issue, but just like any other issue with the business, you have to manage the people who are working for you. And if your valet
Correct.
parkers aren't keeping the traffic moving in front of the restaurant, that's damaging your business. So it's in your interest
No, I
to
understand.
make sure that gets straightened out without the police getting involved with it. So, it means that you'd have to put extra attention on that area, Or else have a smaller restaurant with lower capacity that didn't need as much parking.
I understand the way the board looks at it, and I want it to all work.
So, is there any other factual information, Mr. Tremulak, that you want to let us know about? And Lieutenant, is there anything else that you want to let us know?
Those were the main issues. I understand also there's going to be a change in direction of the traffic flow on Glenridge to begin with.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to bring even more traffic to that area from, accessing the parking deck. So I just think that's something else to take into consideration also. We don't know how the traffic flow is going to change, but I think knowing what is available to be able to be used in the Midtown parking deck is important also.
Yeah.
Well, that's the question. Do you know what's available to be used in the Midtown parking lot? We've had applications that have come here and they've said, oh, it's okay, we're going to get permit to park in the Midtown deck. So what is the open capacity of the Midtown deck to absorb the 207 customers that you may have?
And that's what we really don't
I
know.
don't know that
that.
answer. I apologize, because
Yeah.
that's really has more to do with the parking utility. So I
And this
can't.
came up in the DRC meeting.
Yeah.
Well, I gave you the report from the
Yeah.
parking utility.
But I think we really have to see once it gets
Right,
operating.
because they haven't issued any permits. It's 300
Yeah.
spaces. They have 75 spaces reserved
That
for
report.
employees at the roof, on the top level, but has not been allocated, according to the report which I gave you, it hasn't been allocated to anybody.
That was in our packet?
Mhm.
No, it wasn't.
It's an email.
Oh, it wasn't in our hard copy package.
I believe it was an email that was in your package. The report that he gave me was an email.
Lieutenant, just a quick question. When the neighboring property owners complained about the valet attendants cutting through their property, were any trespass citations written at the time?
Not at the time, I don't believe so. We ended up trying to deal with it directly with the owners and the valet service and rectify it that way so that, you know.
But it would have been a way to go if it hadn't been resolved.
Yes. Yeah.
You mentioned that you started using the Geyer Center YMCA parking. Did the issues, were they mitigated by the use of that parking lot? And from the time you started using that, Lieutenant, do you have any sense of whether there were less issues when they started using the Geyer Center YMCA parking lot?
I only know what lots they were supposed to use, so I don't know every single, area that was in fact used. I know that a lot of it was put on the street, mostly on Forest, the surrounding streets, North Willow, those areas, instead of using the lots. But I don't know about any other private lots that were agreed upon to be used, so.
There's one across from, on Forest, across from the Auto Top place. There's a lot there that I went to. I think there's only maybe 15 or so spots. And then I made a deal with the Auto Top, and they let me use his lot, which fits maybe 10 cars. And then I had the YMCA, and then there was the lot that we were talking about on North Fullerton. That didn't work out for us.
Just to clarify, though, those lots you started using after the issues arose with the North Fullerton lot, or in conjunction with?
No, we always had those lots.
Always had all those lots.
We had the lot diagonal of Salute, where the new building is going up. That was the main lot for us that we were able to use at night. And then when that went, I believe that's when we started on Fullerton to replace that. But the Y was always in place. The Auto Top was always in place.
Always in place.
Across the street from the Auto Top was always in place. So, I mean, I'm not talking money, but I did spend over $3,500 a month on lots. And that's without the Salute lot. And that's without the Fullerton lot.
I guess I have another question. Even if you are able to park in the Midtown Deck lot, you're still going to have the issue about the Ubers, which
Well,
didn't
without
come
the
up.
valet line, they could pull right up to the curb.
Are there
Aren't
parking
those-
meters there?
But aren't there
No.
meters? Won't
It's a
there?
loading zone.
There is a loading zone in front of the
So
meters.
what-
The meters stop before the building.
So how
It's a
many
loading zone.
spots? Are there just one? Uber
No,
could
it goes the whole length in front of, well, we just had it there, I think.
So you're suggesting it's long enough to handle the number of Ubers
Oh, yeah,
you
I
anticipate
think I
getting?
think you could fit, you don't want to go too close to the corner, because, people turning and stuff, but you could go, up to at least the end of the Auto Top building there, so you could fit 2-3 cars. Two would be comfortable to pull over to the curb and let them out there, so the Uber doesn't have to, 'cause it's hard to tell an Uber driver that has his windows closed to don't stop here, but without the valet line, they're gonna be able to pull right over to the side.
Is there
They
anybody?
don't wanna do that.
Is there anybody going to be managing that during your busy
No,
times?
but I mean, that's normally what Uber does. They usually pull over to the curb to pick you up. If you're anywhere on a street, they're not gonna stop in the middle of the street and let you walk to the middle of the street to get in the car. Ubers, when you call an Uber, they pull over on the side of the road.
Except sometimes they have to wait.
Or sometimes they say, I'll meet you on the corner, or I'll meet you down the street. They don't always
Well, that's
pull up
any-
right in front of the
that's anywhere-
door.
That's anywhere in town.
Yeah, so, all right,
Lieutenant
well,
Igman, so I have a question.
We're fortunate that we have no meters in front, and it's a loading zone, loading area. There's signs.
Lieutenant
The
Igman,
whole
so
length.
can people park in loading zones after certain times?
Yes.
So
So
if-
that wouldn't help for the evening, so.
Right, which is when your busiest time. So would there be?
After 6 PM, I believe.
Is there something we could do to make a loading zone an Uber, or a drop-off area?
You could make it designate a drop-off area only, even like from certain times.
So it'd be
yeah.
loading during the day and then drop-off on in the evenings.
If we could sign, Uber drop off, whatever you want.
Well, you'd have to, I guess we have to do that by ordinance, but I think
Correct.
if the council, if the planning board decided not to move ahead with valet parking, we could make it easier to do the Uber parking in the loading zone and prevent people, because I know people who park in loading zones in the evenings,
Yes, and it is legal to do that.
Park in
It's-
front of our place.
but they can.
They can.
Right.
But it's usually you just use it for the valet queue?
Yeah, oh, yeah, it has to be open. The valet has to, there's always run along the curb line.
It would be posted with the no parking, emergency no parking signs there.
But there's also, there was only a couple meters that were down that they would have to put on the posted. But a large portion of the front of my place is a loading area without any meters. So, you know, putting the signs on 2 meters or how many meters or 3 gives you a very long area for driving.
Right.
So, you said you're changing the style of the restaurant business. Do you expect that to change the percentage of your clientele that's coming in and I guess planning to consume enough alcohol that they'd take an Uber rather than drive?
I don't think so. We were very popular when we first opened up the Crosby. I think this is going to be very, just similar to what went on. I don't think it's going to be anything more or, you know, hopefully it's going to be just as much.
If not better.
Well, I mean,
But isn't it a different type?
Yeah.
I think it's,
You
the
had a
price
young
point's gonna
crowd.
be a little bit higher than I had.
They'll drink wine instead of cocktails.
My cocktails are gonna be more expensive. Maybe that will drive less people.
and I meant specifically the split between those driving in themselves versus being dropped off. Do you expect that to change?
Listen, the world has changed. A
Yeah.
lot of people don't need to drive and drink. They're gonna come to my restaurant. A lot of people don't drink. A lot of people drive and don't drink. But if everybody wants to drink, they get an Uber. I mean, all my children, they don't, you know, my nieces, my nephew, my son, they don't go driving out at night if they're gonna be drinking. They all take Ubers, no matter where they are.
And then,
There's a large portion of people that don't go out drinking at night and driving. So there's less cars, I believe, on the road at night that came to my restaurant than I had restaurants in the past where everybody drove. Now it's a different world.
Well, and the flip side of this is that the phenomenon of DoorDash and Uber Eats is not going away post-pandemic, and so we've got the other problem in town of those drivers double parking, triple parking, and using whatever spot they can find to pull over and pick up a restaurant order.
At least
But
not off the start, I don't plan on doing any of that.
it's not, it's about everybody else, too. I mean,
I
Yeah.
understand, I understand.
what?
I'm very fortunate that my area front, I believe the loading zone area that is, you know, is in front of my place and there's not metered parking in front of my place. I think that's a huge help. It was suited for the valet, but not for people that are dropping off in the middle of the street.
And then one more. Were you relieved of the requirement? So say you're relieved of the requirement to provide the valet service, and you found parking was an issue, customers were complaining, business was slow. What would some factors you would take to mitigate that? Perhaps instead of the valet, what's kind of those in-between steps?
What else is there? I don't know.
It could be that the valet's the solution, but
No
I
valet.
wanted to know if there was.
Yeah, no valet would be the
Well,
solution.
then to put the valet back if it's done
Would-
right and it's appropriate and
Would it be possible, I think one of the issues in Montclair is we do not have a valet parking ordinance. We don't have any regulations.
That's something that we've been talking about and
Oh, I
working
know,
on
we've been
also,
working on them for
so
years
I
now.
know.
We just can't get it.
And possibly providing a town-wide
Yeah.
valet parking run through the town instead of privately from
So,
other businesses, so.
Would this be, is this something that perhaps the police department could oversee? Because I know you're the one, you get all the phone calls, and when there's
Yes.
issues, your department gets, so if you're changing the location, if the board does want to keep the valet parking, perhaps we could have the police department be the ones to approve the location. I don't know, but I think they're the ones that understand the problems.
Definitely needs to be, cooperation between whoever's operating the valet parking and the police department, so that they don't have to be bothered with resolving issues there, And again, just my personal opinion from hearing, that what was not being done was the valet, whoever was doing the valet parking or managing that wasn't doing this, wasn't doing that, was doing things that they weren't supposed to do, and they weren't
We're
parking.
cutting through that.
Parking cars on the street, there weren't supposed to be any cars parked on the street. They were all supposed to be put in lots. We knew that the lot at the corner of North Willow was going away because, we had application and we had approved. And we knew that there was going to be building on all of those lots. We had a new art gallery that was being, refurbished in that area. So, we were assured that adequate steps would be taken in order to address the parking issue without burdening the neighborhood. So-
Isn't part of the track record, or what makes a successful valet parking is the distance between your establishment and where your valets park? And I don't think that there's a good location, a reliable location,
Yeah, we would say that. I
in
think
close proximity
we
to.
did our best as far as talking to whatever owner that had a lot in our area. And we even went up to North Fullerton, so we did check everything in our area.
I mean, you have the Fullerton parking deck, which at that time, but that's a couple blocks away.
That's a hike. That's why they were cutting through.
Yeah, and that's why you're cutting through.
And how many cars were you
It
parking?
wasn't the deck, it was actually behind
another
the building.
parking lot
It was
behind,
the
yeah.
office building.
How many cars were you parking at night?
There was a lot of spots back there, and I think at the beginning, I don't think the neighbors knew that we were utilizing the lot, because I remember.
That's a residential area.
But.
It connected through, though,
But
to
there's a
the,
building,
I think it connected through, so.
Okay.
there's a building.
That's what
yeah.
created the problem,
Right.
because it's a commercial on one side and residential on the
I
other.
believe they didn't, at first, maybe one neighbor, some neighbors, all the neighbors didn't know that we were using that lot.
Yeah.
And I think when they saw the guys cutting through, which they shouldn't have, is when they complained. And then
Right,
we
you were
realized
taking
what
the
they were doing, and then we stopped it.
You were taking a shortcut behind a residential building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
From
then what we
Forest
did-
to North
What we did
Fullerton.
was, I believe we didn't stop using the lot, we just.
Stop cutting
What they
through.
used to do is, after a while, they would bring the cars back. And that's when I think when they started to park on the street, knowing that the people would be leaving soon. So-
Because the retrieval time
It
would-
took so much time, it took
the
so much
retrieval
time
time
to get
doesn't
the
work.
cars, to get up there and get the car back, that I believe they started at the end of the night or later on, if they knew a car was there for 2-3 hours, they would try to bring it back. And they were parking,
On Forest Street.
they were parking some on
Well,
Forest Street, but at night, they would park across the street in the lot.
Well, if time is a problem, I've been to restaurants and they tell you, 10 minutes before you think you're gonna leave, text us and we'll go get your car.
They did that.
I mean, there's all sorts of ways that those things can be managed.
They did
I mean, and again, if you can't park, if there's a problem with parking in the area, having to wait a couple of extra minutes, to get parking, you go out in New York and your car is in a parking garage and you gotta wait for them to bring it down on the elevator, so, I mean, instant service isn't always possible, and, customers, if your establishment is good and you got good things to offer, they're not gonna fault you because it takes a couple of minutes more to get their car,
I have to say that the parking company that we first used was not adequate. And I believe that the parking company that we used till I closed did their very best. I believe so.
Well, again, I think we should move on to the core of your application, because this was kind of like a side, if we want to, if we didn't want to, we've spent quite a bit of time discussing this. I don't think that quite frankly, we have enough to make a determination that if we let the valet parking go, that there's not gonna be a
No
problem.
problem.
at this point. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree with, especially with the new traffic pattern, it's gonna be hard to even.
And it's not something that, and I wouldn't, it's not something that we can't consider later. And I mean, there is a, we can, I believe, we can go, if we have a condition on a prior application, we can make an amendment to that prior decision. We don't have to do it as part of a new application. We can amend that prior decision if we're presented with evidence that would show us, that maybe the need for this has gone away.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, Mr. Trembulac referred to this as an amended application in opening. So with that, I think I would agree with you that the board can revisit it, as long as there's sufficient evidence for it.
Right, and I don't think that we would want to do anything unless there was sufficient evidence for it, so. Tony, did you want to?
Well, I have two things. Why is this restaurant being treated differently than other restaurants that don't have parking? I just sort of posed that. Because there's many restaurants in Montclair that don't have valet parking. I think this is C1. Is this a C1 zone where it's an allowed use?
It's C3.
C3, is this allowed use or not?
It's an allowed use.
It's an allowed use.
The short
Okay.
answer to that question, Tony, is that we expanded the operation, and we allowed,
Okay.
We granted a variance to them
To
in
that,
connection
okay.
with this. So that's why we're treating them
Okay.
different with
Okay.
this valet parking.
Okay.
And they weren't the only restaurant that we required
Okay.
valet parking from during this period of time.
Okay. I guess, and then the second point would be, valet parking creates lots of traffic. I'll just make that point. It creates a lot of disruption, which isn't good. Number three, if you don't have valet parking, I think it would entice customers to take Uber, because if you take that option away, they'll say, can I take my chance on the deck or not? So I think that there is prospectively, there could be more Ubers. And then thirdly, which I forgot, or fourthly, I forgot, there's only so many parking spaces to be had, and that's what I'm hearing. And I don't think that we can make a good, validated, where the space is going to come from, and I think that that's always going to be a problem, and the answer is right in front. This enormous parking deck that's being constructed right across the street. And if that parking deck can't accommodate businesses that are right across the street, we've built the wrong thing.
Well, remember that
I mean, quite frankly.
Remember
It's
that parking deck
accommodating
is
if-
accommodating
I mean, when you think
parking
about
from
it-
across the street from the Arts alley, and that parking deck was part of that.
It's not, it doesn't meet the parking demand for Seymour Street. That parking demand is fully met in their two decks.
This
But
is-
it was
that's what I
meant- it was
thought.
This
meant
is
for
why I'm
It was meant for
confused, yeah.
overflow from those decks,
Yeah, it
right?
was. And
Yeah.
now
No.
we have an
think
expanded use
so.
with the medical use, doesn't that have?
No.
And they
no,
don't have
no,
evening hours?
They meet their full parking requirement with the two decks that are, under the west building and part of the east building. This was built through a public-private partnership. It's not even replacing permit spaces that were lost on the other decks, because we have 60 public spaces in the other two decks, in addition to the parking for those uses. Okay, so they have more, the other decks have more parking than they need for those uses, because there's public parking there. This was a public-private partnership. It has to do with some of the transferred permit spaces from those other decks.
Right. So that's why it was dealt with with spaces that were on the Seymour site
Some
that
of
were
them.
transferred over to that.
Some of them, but again, at the end of the day, there's a significant net increase in parking supply, and that's basically for this area.
Right. And so, again, guys, I think that, the deck is not up and operating fully right now. I think, quite frankly, it's premature that for us to make a decision on this. It quite possibly, it can work out where once everything is operating and we can see that there's a problem, that we would wholeheartedly say, let it go away and just make it simple. But I don't think now is the time.
I just don't think that
to
the
do
planning
that.
board doesn't have, once this is approved, you don't have the ability to enforce it 6 months from now. So that's why I think if you give the police department the ability to enforce it.
Yeah. To enforce what?
To determine whether or not the valet parking is working.
Yeah, I see,
And
Or necessary.
if I can ask a
Or
question,
necessary.
Officer, what
Yes.
triggered the valet parking, which, good point, you mentioned that no restaurants really require valet, was the overwhelming complaints from the tenants from Forest Street, if I'm not mistaken, right? Because they were getting overwhelmed with a lot of cars that were just parking for the restaurant, and that's what triggered that restaurant being asked or required to have valet parking. Am I wrong, or?
No, I
No,
believe
it's
it was
always gonna be
it was a
there.
condition of the site
It was-
plan
yeah, they-
approval,
they-
right? Because
they
of
were-
a,
They were converting from the feed store to a restaurant, which was a lot more of an intensive use. So they had a much higher parking demand, and they couldn't meet that on site. And so,
But there were also complaints from Saluto and the operation, the other restaurant that's, I don't know.
Salute?
Yeah.
Salute and.
it was Finn at the time.
Finn.
The
No,
one that-
it was
Finn
Finn.
was-
yeah.
Finn, yeah, right. Because of those restaurants too, were complaints from the neighbors about issues and noise and traffic and,
and when we
there were
heard the
stories in the paper about
when we heard that
you know.
application, I mean, they testified that they were going to use Nicolo's Bakery and Plymouth Academy were like two of the key lots that they were going to use.
In the
which-
opposite direction.
Right, which we thought was far away, but, the applicant said, no, we'll make that work.
That was that was before we opened?
That was
That was part of your
part of the
application.
That was the
application.
testimony,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, we never used that, right, as far as I know.
We thought, I personally thought it was far away, but that was
I
the
don't think-
testimony.
I wasn't part of it. I had partners then, and Jerry wasn't a partner. He was kind of managing the site. He probably didn't make the deals with the other lots that I spoke about before that.
Well, there's an obligation to keep 76 valet spots available. That was the condition of approval.
Do you have existing relationships for parking now?
The YMCA and the Auto Top and the Cross Street Auto Top.
You have actual
Autotop
agreements?
has already submitted a site plan application, so
That's going away.
that's going away.
How many spots
Or-
are available at the lots that you just
There's,
referenced?
there's more than 76.
so I agree that let me back up. I subscribe to Tony's views about valet parking. I'm kind of anti-valet parking in general for the reasons Tony said. I also agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that we don't know enough right now to make a decision, but, and this is kind of a big but, a lot's going to happen at this intersection between the traffic pattern changing and the opening of the Midtown deck. And I'm concerned that we are going to completely unintentionally create a dangerous condition that I would like to give the police department the ability to immediately ameliorate without needing to go through our process. And so what I was asking was, is there anything we can do to allow the police department to take immediate action without needing to go through a process that could take 6 to 12 weeks to get to us?
I don't know whether it would take 6 to 12 weeks. Would it?
Would it be? I'm
For
sorry.
us to consider to get rid of the valet parking requirement that we've put in place as a condition.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not hearing correctly. What I'm hearing Jeff say is that inadvertently, if we got rid of the valet requirement, we could be exacerbating the situation over there.
No, I'm saying the
No,
opposite.
no.
I'm saying if we leave everything in place, but we add something that basically makes clear the intention of this board, that if keeping the valet condition, while after the traffic pattern changes, the police department looks at this and says the valet condition is creating an inherently dangerous situation, the police department can relieve them of the valet parking condition that we've imposed.
Well, I think that if it's an inherently dangerous situation,
They can
the
do
police
it.
department can do that anyway.
Correct.
I don't think that's part of their basic police power to mitigate inherently dangerous situations. Are you listening to the words that you're using?
I am,
Jeff?
but I also, but I've been around this. I've been around this block a few times. I know they can stop. They can make the traffic flow in
No,
a
they
different
can stop
way.
the valet parking. They can stop the valet parking if it's creating a dangerous situation. You don't think so?
It depends.
Well,
It's much more complicated than.
let's-
than-
But the
let's-
question, isn't the
yeah, let's-
question, what would the police department do? I mean,
how would the police department evaluate whether or not
Right.
the parking situation, the valet is no longer needed because the cars can be adequately parked?
Well, I
You
mean.
know, and then how long would that review last? I mean, this week it's fine. Next week, business increases, they run a special. What happens then? I'm a little bit touchy about this because we granted a variance based on representations that were made to us, and there was inadequate follow-through on it. So I'm a little bit distrustful about going forward with making any other alterations until we can be sure that whatever we do is not going to create another problem. And to the point of what Art said, that's what I was thinking. If the valet parking gets, well, let's try getting rid of the valet parking. Oh, that's a problem. What if that doesn't solve the problem? Then are we going to be able to bring it back? Or does now everybody just, goes for themselves and they find another place to park?
what about, Mr. Tremblak, if the applicant were to agree that after some period of time, that with the Midtown deck opens, there's a change in the traffic pattern on that street, and would the applicant agree to come back before the board with an analysis of what's going on?
Perhaps. I was thinking something along the same lines.
Or
Say,
another way we could do that is once the deck opens up, allow the applicant to allow for parking and then ask the police department if they would monitor it for a month. And if it's for some fixed period of time, and that if they feel that it's creating a better situation, then we'll let it stay. If they feel that it's not creating a better situation, then we have to go back to the drawing board, reinstate the valet parking, and find another way to address it.
The other
It's
unknown.
kind of self-executing.
The other unknown in all this is how that deck is going to be utilized. And I think it's important to note, we're talking 300 spaces, 75 spaces are apparently going to be allocated to monthly permits, so that's 225 spaces. The applicant's required to provide valet parking for 76. So that's, less than a third of the number of spaces potentially available in the deck. And we're talking about the time in the deck that's not likely to be utilized heavily. We're talking evening hours. So,
Is that deck going to be, or I don't know, are a certain amount of the spaces in that deck going to be limited to permits?
It's going to be like, it's like.
Just 75, that's all?
It's just 75. It's going to operate like the Crescent deck.
Mhm.
Where you go in, you get a ticket. And some people might have a special rate ticket, but it's essentially just like the Crescent deck.
Mhm.
Would you be able to tell us what portion of those 76 spots were used on any given night, like average, whereabouts?
During the week, not many at all. On the weekends, we would never, I believe we never had 76 valet cars at once.
Where do your employees park? Wherever.
Wherever.
Yeah.
So what about self-executing it?
I wanted to
And-
understand what you meant by that. Did you mean it would be remove the requirement, and if the police determine that it has not improved, we will revisit it and reimpose it? Or is it assuming the requirement stays in place?
The requirement stays in place until the deck becomes fully operational. Once it's fully operational, we will, once they can suspend the valet parking, and then the police will then monitor it for a month to see how it's operating. If they feel that it's safe and that it's solved the problem, then fine. If it's not, the valet parking stays. So it's and if it doesn't, and that way the police is evaluating it, they don't have to come back before us if it's working out fine, and we'll get the opportunity at least to see how the deck is functioning and to see whether, some other issue has come up with the deck.
The unsafe condition, but wasn't that, I thought I heard that the unsafe condition is a product of the valet parking. because the
Would
cars are
drop
double
off-
parking.
would
So if you
the
drop,
The double line of cars
so,
would drop.
so if you
off.
drop the valet parking by that rationale, the dangerous condition goes away. So when we talk about the dangerous condition, what are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about the dangerous condition, Jeff.
So I think that what you described, Mr. Chairman, is a good way to go. What I'm concerned about is that a lot is going to be changing at this intersection. The reason why we have a traffic bureau in the police department is to evaluate that which is safest. And so, obviously, if they see something that is an immediate danger to the public, they can do whatever they want. The problem is, if they see a situation that they perceive as less safe than something else, they can't necessarily step in and do something immediately, and then the next thing we know, somebody's getting run over in an intersection. And we feel as though, wait a minute, maybe we should have deferred to the expertise of the Traffic Bureau. So I think that what you just outlined, Mr. Chairman, makes eminent sense to me, which is that we basically say, once the deck is open, they suspend the requirement, the Traffic Bureau looks at it. If they say this is the best set of conditions, it stays. If they say it's not, then we come back and we hash it out here. I think that's a great idea.
So I don't want to throw.
Go ahead and throw it.
We agree on something, and here comes the lawyer.
Go ahead and throw it.
I think one of the problems I see is that the scenario you've proposed puts an awful lot of discretion in the police department and traffic bureau, and there's nothing that I see or heard that is objective, that gives the police department some objective measure by which to evaluate this situation. That's the problem, one of the problems I see.
Why? But it's art. It's not science, and that's okay. I mean, it's there.
But there can be standards of like double parking citations or incidents reported, or there can be
Complaints from the
neighbors
residents about
and
illegal
residents.
parking.
Right.
And such
Everything
like.
that
What if the applicant, now the recipient of a resolution of the board, doesn't agree and says, this
Then they can
is.
come
No.
back to the board.
Well, I mean, we would be putting the power in the police department, and the applicant would be agreeing to abide by that in order to get that condition. Otherwise, it stays,
I think that's good.
stays what it is.
Would that be an acceptable condition to the applicant?
I'm not sure I'm following it or how it would. You lost me there.
No, let me-
somewhere. What would be the condition?
So the point is that when I'll state it this way and tell me if I'm wrong. When the Midtown parking deck opens, the owner would be able to suspend the valet parking requirement and be in consultation with the police department, and we suspend it for a period of a month or whatever, we can, the planner and the lieutenant can talk about what that period of time should be.
I'm curious to see how it goes
Yeah.
too. With the
And then at the conclusion of that time, if it's the judgment of the Traffic Bureau that the absence of the valet parking is fine and everything's going and the traffic is flowing, then it can stay gone. On the other hand, if it's not, then it snaps back unless we come back and work something else out.
That's perfectly acceptable to us.
See,
I
that
think the
addresses my
proper way to go,
problem
'cause I
with
personally
not
think
having
there's-
enough information right
Yeah.
now.
I
And it-
personally think there's going to be enough spaces in the deck, but that's my personal opinion, but we'll have the benefit of a month or so of usage to see if in fact that is the case.
Do you think, Lieutenant, do you think a month after the parking deck opens, do you think a month would be a sufficient period of time for the Bureau to evaluate the situation?
I think it also depends on the time of year that it is. I hate to say that, but
Right.
if it's in the
Well,
summertime, it's going to be a little different than, when you have people maybe walking
Well,
more
we
even
can-
than driving, but it would be a little bit different than the winter time,
Well,
so.
Well, we could
And-
also
and
put
I-
that, we could also put that determination about how long it would take in the hands
Of course.
of the Bureau, so that they, they can make the
So let me ask,
evaluation.
assume, just for the moment, assume that you walk out of here tonight and the board approves the application. When would you foresee the business opening and being in full?
I was going to mention that. I am hoping that I'll be opened up within 3 months' time.
3 months from today, so you're talking September?
And the parking deck should be open within the 4 weeks. So I expect the parking deck will
To be open before the business is right.
before they're, yeah.
So,
Okay.
Can I ask
Well-
one more question, Janice? What are the applicants that you were talking about for, you said you had application for the auto place on the corner? Is that going to be another restaurant, or?
It's going to be a mixed,
mixed
a
use?
small mixed-use building,
Mhm.
so. Couple
That'll
of-
add to the,
They'll need their
the
own
density of the, yeah.
There will
yeah.
be a parking, they've told me they want a parking variance, but it's not going to be a big number.
Well,
I told them to
Yeah.
prepare themselves.
right. And the other lot, is that associated with that church that, that's the
I don't.
Swedish church?
No, I think that lot is being used by the owner of the Bank of America building, which is now Rouse. Or, I don't know, it's the building at the corner.
Yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
use that lot for parking.
During the day kind of thing?
Right, it's an office
Oh.
building.
Mm.
So,
Oh, boy.
So are they reversing the traffic direction right when the Midtown deck opens? Is that, how
well,
is that time?
no, that's when the I spoke to the county today, and they told me they expect to have all the work at that intersection of Glenridge, North Fullerton, Bloomfield done within 2 months, so by the end of July. And that includes changing the flow of traffic from westbound to eastbound on Glenridge Avenue.
Does it run the entirety?
No, just to Forest Street. And then it'll be two-way.
It'll be a two-way.
it'll stay
two-way.
two-way the rest of the.
And we also have a bike lane going in there too, a two-way bike lane. So there's a lot of change happening around there. And I think your approach is really good, given the number of factors that are affecting what's going on there.
Okay.
Well, we need to hear the rest of your application.
There is more to this. I mean, what
Poor
brought us here
Jackson.
is the 200 square foot.
Lieutenant,
good.
just one last question, too.
Yes, sir.
Is this going to be okay with your operation and your command, and everybody, will be okay with us having this responsibility?
Doing the evaluation, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We'll be able to do that.
All right.
I think it's just in the best interest for all the parties involved, so, and the neighborhood and the community, so, absolutely.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for coming.
No problem.
Good? Yeah.
Okay, my next and last.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Tremulak, I just had one more question for the applicant. Are there plans for outdoor seating?
Yeah, it's,
And just to be clear, the outdoor seating, whatever number of seats go outdoors, the indoors will be reduced by that number? So it won't change the number of total seats when you utilize the outdoor seating?
I think the next witness is going to discuss the seating plan, but that's in
Perfect.
fact the case. There'll be 207 seats combined.
No matter whether it's all indoors or indoors and outdoors?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Al.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Can I call Jackson Bangs then as my next witness? Jackson, maybe you're going to be standing anyway, but you can start at the podium.
That works.
So Jackson, we'll mark your exhibit as A11.
And the PowerPoint is A11?
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Jackson Bangs, architect for the applicant on behalf of Sionis Architecture.
Okay. Jackson, why don't you start by reviewing your educational background and your professional qualifications?
Certainly. I received a Bachelor's of Architecture from the University of Notre Dame in 2012. Since 2013, I've worked for Sionis Architecture here in Montclair. In 2019, I was licensed by the state of New Jersey as an architect, and I have
testified not before this board, but before the zoning board in Montclair, as well as the zoning board in Bernardsville, New Jersey.
And is it fair to say you've worked closely with Paul Sionis and the other folks at Sionis Architecture on a lot of the plans that this board has reviewed over the years?
Yes, in fact, I worked closely on the prior application for this property.
Okay. Will the board accept his qualifications as an architect? Thank you. All right, Jackson, you prepared the plans that were submitted to this board in connection with the current application as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you've prepared the PowerPoint that's on the screen to assist you in reviewing those plans tonight with the board?
Yes.
Okay, and why don't you proceed and discuss the plans using the PowerPoint as you see fit?
Certainly. So, good evening. As you all know, I'm here to present a proposed addition to the building at 189, 191 Glenridge Avenue. You can see the site is outlined here. It is in the C3 zone within, we met with the HPC last month and they generally supported the project. I believe that you all received their memo recently. As we've discussed previously, we're proposing a small addition on the west side of the building of approximately 225 square feet. Just to review, this is what the property looked like in 2015 before it became the Crosby. It's a bit dark, but this is what the building currently looks like, more or less, as the Crosby. Here are drawings that are depicting the building as it currently exists. The subject area that we're talking about is right here on a disused driveway next to the building. So, as I said, this is our proposed addition, this darker red rectangle here. It's approximately 25 feet long by 9 foot 2 inches wide. And as we've discussed quite a bit, we have renovations underway now. The interior layout has changed. We've relocated the restrooms, which were previously over here, to the rear of the building to make a much wider, more open seating area. There was previously seating in the back. We've just moved it, just utilizing the area we have differently. Now, the area that Greg was describing, the utility room, is here on the side. That utility room was existing before it became a restaurant. There's a lot of the gas meters, electric meters, the fire sprinklers, the telephone data, everything comes in right here. So it really made a lot of sense for it to be on that wall. Generally, the utility company, PSE&G, likes meters. Sorry, this is so jumpy. They like meters to be close to where the service enters the building. So when we were discussing reconfiguring the building, really moving the service away from that area was out of the question. It just didn't make sense. So the logical way to deal with it was to simply move it from this side of the wall to that side of the wall. Because we didn't really ever use this driveway. We used the rear area as a beer garden. It was approved as such in the previous application, and it will continue to be used as such. So that was kind of leftover space. As Greg discussed, we also need a wine cellar for the new use. So this was a good place to put a nice new wine cellar that'll be conditioned separately from the rest of the building to maintain proper temperature for storing wine for a long period of time, things like that. The table layout, it's a little bit difficult to see, but you can see the large bar that many of you are probably familiar with will remain. We're moving around what the table configuration was and now will be. It's a little bit different. There's and yeah, what Greg said will be what will. Well, that's weird. So yeah, the outdoor layout will consist of 38 seats, not 38 tables. The inside will be 169. The total is 207, which is the same number that we previously had. Moving on, here are the proposed elevations. The only difference between these and the elevations that you have in your packets is that these ones are colored so that they're easier to see on the screen. The proposed addition visible here will remain below the existing building's eaves so that it's subservient to it in massing. It also means that we won't need to modify the existing roof line, which will make the construction simpler and also keeps the historic, the older portion of the structure fully intact. As you can probably see, much of the building's addition will be hidden by a fence. This is an existing fence. However, it's being moved as part of this application. Currently, it sits, well, before construction started, it sat in roughly the same place that the addition's front wall is. Currently, it's leaning against the back wall of the property because it was moved out of the way. This area, this fence, we're proposing to put it back here as part of because the addition, because we'd like to, it's to help with taking out the trash from the restaurant. The building currently has and will continue to have an interior trash room behind the kitchens, where essentially when all the cleaning happens, it goes from the end of the dish line through a door into this trash room, and then stays there. The room is fully sprinklered and ventilated, all up to code. And then at the end of the evening, when cleanup happens, those trash bins are brought through the restaurant as it's being cleaned. Currently, they're taken out to the curbside where they sit and wait for a private pickup, which the owner has arranged to happen. Greg has 6 days a week?
Yep.
6 days a week, early every morning. What we're planning to do is to improve that situation by putting it in this area in front of the addition, behind that existing fence, so that it leaves the curb clear. The existing fence, it's a black aluminum fence. We'd like to fasten a sheet of metal similar to what we use for trash enclosures to the rear of the fence so that you can't see through it. That metal would be finished either black to match the fence or a battleship gray kind of color. So here, this is the same view you saw before. This is the addition without the fence in front of it. It comes up to the property line as is required in this zone. And we're continuing the brick detailing on the existing building around onto the proposed addition. Lastly, when we visited the Development Review Committee, there was discussion about the existing culvert, which is under the rear portion of the beer garden, and there were questions about whether the flow for water was unobstructed and clear. So because of those questions, we went down and took a look. So you can see here, these are 2 photos taken last month. These are the walls of the culvert. The water is flowing pretty well through it. You can actually see some bedrock visible here. There's no debris. To our knowledge, this property hasn't flooded. The culvert hasn't backed up and caused water to flow across it. There's ample height and width there. So that concludes my testimony. I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. No further questions from me.
Is there somewhere in the plans where it shows what that fence is going to, once you redo it with the sheet metal, exactly what it's going to look like in real life? Because that's going to be street facing, right?
Yes.
That's the first thing you're going to see after you pass the edge of the building and you look down. So that's how the existing fence looks.
Yes.
And that's what you're going to put behind it.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
so it'll be the same fence, but just with that panel attached to it.
If I recall, the HPC also requested to review before, with the design review committee.
That's
as well.
correct.
Yes.
Yes. We will submit the detail, the cross section we prepared after presenting to the HPC.
Is that the same fence that's already there?
Yes.
And it's black vinyl, right?
It's black metal.
Oh, black
It's
metal,
aluminum.
okay.
Yeah.
It's actually, it's metal, it's not, it's aluminum.
Yeah. I think it's I don't think it's steel.
No, it's steel.
Yeah. Oh, it's steel? Okay. I stand corrected. It's a steel fence.
Steel fence,
Yeah.
okay.
Black steel,
Black
not
steel.
black aluminum.
And when you had mentioned about the trash being behind the fence, that's only immediate,
Yes.
in immediate proximity to
Right.
being picked up,
That
either
would be
early in the morning or late at
Roughly
night.
between 3 in the morning and 8 in the morning, something like
Yeah,
that.
it's usually around between 5 and 6 in the morning.
So last thing at night, they
Yeah.
would move the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
Most likely, I'm gonna have someone there 24 hours, so the cleaning crew will take the garbage out after the place is closed in these big, what are they called, totes?
yeah, totes, large kind
Large
of
totes,
wheelbarrow
carts with lids on
bin.
them
Mhm.
that are about this wide and maybe 5 or 6 feet long.
That the truck picks up and.
Yeah.
No.
No.
Yeah, you're able to reach in, so
Oh.
they'll be stored there, maybe 2 or 3, depending on how busy the night is, will be lined up in there.
Mhm.
They call it a light pickup, where they come and they'll open the gate, they'll lift up the hoods or wheel to the truck and then throw the plastic bags into the truck.
It's not dumpsters.
Now,
They're totes.
I could get them any size, I'm gonna get
Yeah.
large ones. They're not that wide, so you get them pretty long and they're on wheels and they can be wheeled up the sidewalk, through the fence and stored there with lids on them. And then-
They're like plastic.
And then in the morning before we
vinyl.
open, we take them back and we put them back into the refuse room inside the restaurant. And then the same thing happens during the next night.
I believe you're not allowed to pick up garbage, commercial garbage, before 6 o'clock.
Well, then maybe I was never there 5 to see
Yeah,
it.
well, I'm just saying because, I had a problem with noise with garbage
Yeah, I
pickup.
believe, but, yeah, I've never seen the garbage there when I went in the morning, so I didn't really know exactly what time.
I think the intent's to continue to pick up the trash at the same time that you were
They're on
before.
the route in the area, so I'm sure that they're on schedule with the town.
I hope so, because as I said, you're not supposed to pick it up before 6, and you're in a residential area, and the trucks are noisy, believe it or not. They are.
Anecdotally, I
Yeah.
used to walk past the restaurant going to work every day, and the garbage was there at roughly 7:45 in the morning.
So I don't know what time.
So it's later.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what's the measurement between where the new addition ends and the wall of the next building? How big is the passageway?
From the wall of our building to the property line is roughly 9 feet, slightly, it varies slightly. I believe it's 9 foot 2 inches at its narrowest point. From the wall of our property to from the wall of the subject building to the wall of the Autotop building is several feet more.
Well, the wall, I'm just want to know how big is the passageway between this extension building that you're putting, because that's the only egress from the back. If people are out in the back.
Yeah.
And there's something happens in the restaurant, that's the only way that they get out, is up that alley and out the front, right?
There are two ways. Egress would flow through the restaurant out to the street. There are two doorways that would go from the back patio
Right.
into the restaurant.
But there's
and
no
then
way to
back
get
out.
out the back
There
of
is
the
not.
property.
No.
So I just wanted to know how big the because I was looking on the
Yeah.
drawings and I couldn't see a measurement.
The intent is not for egress to go through that.
I get that, but that it's still, as a practical matter, could become a way to escape the back of the building. And so I want to know how far the building is, that this extension that you're putting in, how far away is it from the next building?
If I could measure on the plan, that would.
I think when they come in with the plans for the next building, they're going to build to the property. Their anticipation is to build to the property line too.
So we need to know between the new building wall to the property line, not just
If they
the...
build to the property line, then the passage would be 0.
If they build the property line, the passage is 0.
Yes.
Right.
Because your building goes to the property line. The bump
Right.
out goes to
As
the
The
property.
extension wall.
Okay.
Yes.
And there's no crash bar on the gate, so if somebody were to go down that driveway, they couldn't push the gate open?
So they can't get out, they won't be able to get past
The gate would.
you could climb over
The
it.
gate isn't wide enough for a vehicle to pass.
No, I mean, in the chairman's scenario, there's an emergency or some people want to get out of the beer garden, they walk down that alleyway towards the gate. There's no way for them to get the gate open.
No.
They'd have to go over it.
gonna be left
The
open.
building.
It's left open?
There's no reason to lock it
Right.
Oh, okay.
with the building there. with the-
Yeah, that area between the building and the fence.
Yeah, because
That-
it would be, have to be open for the garbage man to open it up and to get it. I'm not gonna give them the key.
And they're coming in there 6 days a week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any way to get to the street from the back in the event of an emergency?
No.
You have to go through the building.
You
Through
would
the
go
building.
through the building. The building is fully sprinklered. There are 3 means of egress.
No, I understand. I'm just
Yeah.
asking, worst case scenario. But,
No, there's not.
Okay.
But Jackson, the sheet A1 has a site plan, I'm sorry, C1 has a site plan but no survey. Are you aware of any easements that are historical, that either utility easements or access easements, either for Tony's Brook or any other purpose that serve other properties?
I am not.
Has the property been surveyed recently that would show those? 'Cause right now, we've got a superimposed meets and bounds on a simple site plan.
The property is, to my knowledge, the most recent survey was, I'm not aware of when the most recent
Okay.
survey was.
Could I request a survey be submitted with applications in the future? This is a request that I've had numerous times. I've asked this for, if we have a survey, we need to know if other entities have any sort of access or rights over any property that we see. So it'd be helpful if we do get that, and we would need someone to certify that no one has use of this alleyway that you're building a building on. They probably don't, but we just need to know.
Well, I think the survey would have been submitted in connection with the prior application, and there wouldn't be any change other than what we're proposing tonight.
And the only thing that makes me suspicious is it was a driveway, that's all, for no other. And there's also a brook back there, and don't.
Other questions from the board?
I'm just curious, what's on the other side? What's behind the building? So you have the brook, and then what's next to the brook?
Behind, as in north away from Forest Street?
I guess I'm looking at
like
the
on
building.
the other side of the brook.
There's the beer garden, there's the brook, and then there's what?
Forest Supply.
There's an apartment building that fronts Forest Street.
An apartment building.
That runs behind this lot.
Thank you.
Is any of this construction going to be disturbing anything in the brook?
No,
Nothing at all, right?
nothing.
Okay. Because the reason I ask is because before this building was the restaurant and there was a pet store or something.
Mhm.
Before that, it was actually the auto shop
Yes.
that used to be Smith Boring.
Mhm.
So for just if you're going to be doing any kind of construction, just making sure that there are no contaminants that go into that brook. So
Yeah.
nothing constructing anywhere close to this.
There will be no construction
Okay.
in the vicinity of the brook or the culvert.
And on sheet C1, I think drawing 1, what's the proposed two-story addition?
Yes, that was actually something we discussed at the HPC. That note is there in error.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's
No.
no two-story
There-
addition that's going in, the only thing is this
No.
extension, which is a roughly
There are no
one-story.
plans for a two-story addition.
But I thought it was approved. A two-story addition was approved, but you never built it.
What
that
was
correct?
approved but unbuilt was a roofed patio in that area. Simple metal roof
Okay.
with one, I believe, one, possibly two columns. There was never any second floor proposed for this space, nor are we proposing one.
Other questions? You don't really have a public here unless Lieutenant wants to ask a question. All right. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Tremulek, is that your application?
That completes our application, Mr. Chairman. I pretty much will submit. I mean, we have an application, doesn't require any variances, a simple site plan, and obviously we've had a lot of discussion and I think came to some understandings regarding how to deal with the parking issue, which is acceptable to the applicant. I'll leave that to the board's discretion as to how to condition that.
Well, with that, I would propose that we approve the application with conditions. The conditions that we discussed with respect to the valet parking should be memorialized. There was also another condition about the confirmation of the owner's consent. We need a survey, Tony?
Yeah, I think just a certification that there's no other rights to the property, that's all.
Or certification.
Yeah, just make sure of that. Yeah.
I think we had a change to have an Uber sign,
A,
an Uber sign or drop-off sign. Is that part of the condition?
That would have to be done by the council.
Oh, we don't want to mention it anywhere? That's one of our hopes that they have it.
It would maybe a condition that the applicant work with the council to designate the loading zone as for short-term parking.
there you go.
Short-term drop-off, pickup.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
Anything else?
Yeah, I think Mr. Graham mentioned that the HPC wanted to review the fence.
The gate.
Yes, the design review committee would like to see the fence.
Yeah, there are actually
Yeah.
two conditions in the HPC report which we would comply with.
Okay.
Okay.
And anything else, Art, besides the standard?
That's all I have.
Okay. So that's the motion?
Second the motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Thank you,
Thank you
gentlemen.
very much, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Good luck. I hope your new format takes hold.
Dates on the house for everybody?
We don't say that on the record.
red light's not on.
Let's just try and.
Just going back to the resolution, the reason why I paused, I mean, my personal view was I thought that the revisions that Ms. Lockman proposed were, I thought that they captured what we were trying to capture, and then Mr. Brodock took some of the oomph out of it. I know he did it intentionally, and so both versions are an improvement over what was there. I'm really kind of fine with either. I think that there is probably a middle ground between the maximum oomph and the minimum oomph. And I was thinking maybe we could go for that, but if we don't want to spend any more time with it and we want to adopt Mr. Brodock's, that's
So
okay.
you're saying that mine is the middle ground, right, between what Mr. Neese had proposed?
Well,
which would be
Mr. Neese was,
Well, that's the minimum
we
oomph.
discarded the complete lack of oomph.
I was like, it sounded like mine's the middle ground now.
Flesh and fervor, you like that?
Flesh and fervor. Since when is legislation a place for flesh and fervor?
Sure, have you ever read Supreme Court decisions?
Except
Yeah,
it
they're full of
it's not, except it's not, I mean, it is the only memorialization, and there is some concern that when this goes to the council, it needs to have a little bit of the sense of why. And the main thing I'm reacting to is that you changed that the public comments rebutted certain of the criteria, whereas Ms. Lockman's version suggested that there was at least one comment rebutting every criteria. And I think that Ms. Lockman's is accurately stating the fact. So that's why I was thinking that a little more oomph is better, but that's why I thought maybe we wanted to just take one more swing, publish it, do it at the next meeting. But if you don't want to take more time, I'm okay with that too.
What if we just added a section saying that all of the criteria were refuted and keep Mr. Brodock's middle ground? Would that work?
But were they? I didn't go back and look to see that.
I don't recall.
That was part of the reason I took it out. Like, I didn't go back and verify that somebody refuted each of the criteria.
I know that I didn't go back either. My personal recollection is that, yeah, somebody had something to say about each one, but I don't know whether their refuting was valid, or I would accept it as being.
I don't disagree with that, but
and we wouldn't want to, and I wouldn't want to necessarily suggest that it was. I mean, I think that we would be better served characterizing that there were objections. And that whether it was for all of them or almost all of them, I don't think we have to argue about it.
I agree.
The point is made that there were objections about all of the points, from the public.
And we found none of the criteria
from the
met.
public, and
Right.
we found.
Right. Okay.
Right.
We also discussed the possibility of including the fact that the vote was unanimous. I know it was the change was made in the minutes, I think, or the minutes have it, but the minutes aren't what we're going to present to the public or the council. So I would think that the resolution, I think it's important to say that it was, the council resolutions always have a vote, who was there, and we're going to have X's all down the left-hand side, right? So I think that also is a way to provide a little bit more punch.
I agree with that too.
You
And
could
it's
just
what
say by
happened.
unanimous decision on page 2.
Well, the thing on the resolution.
Oh, it is, I'm sorry, in the.
No, I'm
in-
saying that that'd be a very simple change,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
to
or
say
just
that-
put the vote,
Yeah.
whatever, so the standard
Just say
thing
it's
that's in.
unanimous.
The one thing I did have there that Keith did delete was that, we listened to the testimony, and then within it was 3 minutes, we voted with no discussion. So it clearly gave the
Cuts both
impression that
ways.
we were convinced by the public's comments. So that's why I put that in there, but.
Well, I don't know that we actually said that it was the public or whatever else it was that convinced us, and that's, to Jeff's point, it cuts both ways. That we voted so quickly, we were not able to give each rationale, and really make that determination. So I think.
It's fine with it out. I'm not.
Yeah.
just-
Okay. I'm just.
All right, so we're.
People can spin that in the other direction.
I agree.
Yeah, I just didn't want to start the precedent that we would time basically the debate of every
So I think
application.
we're mostly coalescing around the Brodock slightly more oomph, you know, but less than the full oomph. But I think we need to tweak it a little bit. But
Well, can we just
we can do it
get
now.
done now? I mean,
Okay, let me just pull it up.
I mean, we're here. I don't think Mr. Neese is really gonna.
Okay,
make
it
any
wasn't about him.
adjustments, so
It was-
I would-
okay.
You've
that's fine.
already seen I have no flesh and fervor, okay, so.
I am not, you know,
I wanna be on record
not going
with
anywhere near that way.
I would
Your
say
flesh, your fervor, none of my business. We're
I
not.
I do, however, want to just point out one thing that both Ms. Lockman and Mr. Brodock took out, which is in the first, second, third paragraph, the words "are interested or would be affected by a determination that." Those words were not mine. You took them out. Those words are actually in the statute itself, and that's what was required. That's why I put it in. If you don't want those words in, I just wanted you to be aware that that's where it came from.
I didn't think we knew that, really.
I'm sorry?
I didn't think that was factual. I don't have my version in front of me, but I took it
I
out because it didn't seem like it was necessarily supported by what we heard that evening.
At that point, it's a whereas clause.
Oh, okay.
And it basically serves as the predicate for why you were doing it. And I could just read to you from the statute that says, quote, "The planning board shall specify a date for and give notice of a hearing for the purpose of hearing persons who are interested in or would be affected by a determination that the delineated area is a redevelopment area," end quote.
And you know, here in Montclair, we have a broad definition of affected by. That sometimes extends beyond the borders of Montclair.
So I would suggest we put back the language that was struck, and then the only other change I would suggest is the word. I'm still troubled by the word certain. I would just change it to the. Rebutted the criteria. So it's not all. It's not certain. It's just rebutted the criteria.
Agreed.
Sold.
The only thing I would just change is where the part that we struck that Mr. Neese just read, add the word "in" after "interested" because that was missing. But I heard that when you recited the statute.
As opposed to "or"?
Well, it said "are."
It could be both.
Well, the way it's written now, or was written, if we undo the edits, it says "are interested or would be affected." I think you read "are interested in or would be affected."
And
Yeah.
you would want to add the word "in"?
And if we're going by the statute, I would.
Yeah,
I
and
couldn't agree
Janice
more.
suggested adding the word unanimously between board and recommends, and I agree with that too. And then with those changes, the Brodock compromise is so moved.
That's a motion, yes. And I'll second that.
Wait,
motion.
no. Oh, okay. I'm a little late.
So
Jeff, you made the motion?
I did,
Okay.
and John seconded
And I
it.
second.
And Sean seconded.
And we're using his version as we edit it tonight.
Yes.
I know you got
You
that.
got all that?
No, I didn't get that. But I'll take
I
a
got
crack
the
at it.
unanimously part, so. All right.
When does this get posted to YouTube?
It's on right
It's
now.
on right now. This is
We're
live.
Are there any bills to pay or?
Wait a minute,
Oh, wait,
all
we
in
gotta take a
favor?
vote.
Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. I do have two other items. One is our planning board subcommittees. Okay, I know it, Jacob, you're not a member of any of the committees.
I am not, no.
So I gave a list of the 2022 committees. Under communications, Frederick Cook's no longer a member of the board, so we just have Keith Brodock for communications subcommittee. The personnel committee, that empty slot is going to be the class 2 member, which is currently vacant. So that would have to wait until that class 2 member is appointed. But everything else is up for grabs. If anybody wants to make any committee changes. And Jacob, I don't know where
Or
you're.
Mr. Neiman, if you have something you're interested in, we can probably strike a Brodock compromise and shuffle folks around if you're interested.
Yeah, and if I need to step off of a committee to make room for somebody,
Yeah.
I can step off. I'm on a few, so I've got committees to spare.
I guess if I could get a quick overview of what each
All right,
does.
well, I mean,
If
planning
it's
board.
not immediately clear.
Planning Board Revisions Committee, I handed out reports tonight for revisions to 60 Post Square. They meet occasionally, 'Cause there's always changes to plans.
And sometimes we don't even meet, we give our opinion by email to Janice, you know.
Yep.
Depends on
Redevelopment Subcommittee,
what we're
we have a
looking at.
couple of redevelopment plans that we will be working on this year. We are going to be working on Lackawanna Plaza at some point. It's just slow getting started. Master Plan Subcommittee, right now, anything to do with the master plan is on hold until we resolve the stormwater issue. And we have a stormwater committee. If you want to sit with, it's not even on here. You're welcome to join the stormwater committee.
My car's flooded twice, so we'll go with that.
That sounds great, because we could really use help, your help. I think you'd be valuable on that. And everything else, I think, is pretty explanatory.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, stormwater sounds fine.
May I make just a quick point? I just noticed something this week about stormwater. We added, in the stormwater reg, we added if someone adds a patio of 250 square feet or
Yeah.
more, then it requires green infrastructure. I saw 2 instances where existing roofs were piped directly to the street, and that completely sidesteps any of the regs that we've got. So, and that's a pretty significant amount of water that's being directed directly to the street. Do you know if there's a permit that's required to redirect water?
No.
I just, because I was just wondering, I don't know what to.
But are those new builds or old?
It's an existing house, and it formerly fed to the ground. And it's just, I saw 2 installations where there's corrugated pipe that goes right through the curb.
But when like mine goes in the ground, but then it exits at the curb.
Yeah, well, if you haven't done it recently, yeah. But I'm just wondering if there's a new installation of that, that probably would do more in terms of redirecting more volume of water than someone with a patio that, if they put in a 250 square foot patio, most of that runoff will probably just go, you know, locally around the patio.
Yeah, I mean, by ordinance, you can have roof drains exit onto the roadway, but you can't discharge a sump to the roadway. And I've seen a lot of evidence of that. And even in my inspections, I found one sump was discharging directly into the catch basin, which I would assume is not allowed.
I don't think so, no. They're lucky that there's a catch basin, though.
Oh, they pipe, it's about a 6-inch pipe going into it.
Wow.
Do you have to have a permit to put in a sump pump?
That I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so. So, okay, Jacob, we will probably be scheduling a meeting this month for the Stormwater Committee, and we'll reach out to you.
Sounds
And
good.
Keith and
Yep.
Tony
Mr.
are on that
Ianwali,
same
yep.
committee. Okay? Good. The- Okay, about the Hampton House.
Yeah, I
Oh,
can describe it very briefly for the board. In 2019, we approved the Hampton House conversion to an office building or partial retail or whatever, and they proposed to put a ramp on the Fullerton Avenue streetscape. And we heard testimony that the ramp was in the way, and they also testified that minimal work would be done on the sidewalk. Well, if you drive past there, the sidewalk is now elevated 2 feet above the street, which violates a curb height. A curb height has to be 6 inches. And it's a dangerous situation unless they don't put a rail there. And I'm just confused in terms of how we should look at that, because we specifically reviewed that side, and they said minimal work to be done. They submitted a plan, and I know that.
It said no work, no changes to the sidewalk.
Yeah, so now the
Plans.
sidewalk is 2 feet off the ground, so if someone walks by and steps off the curb, they go 2 feet down, which is not great. And also visually, there has to be, I would think that there would have to be, for safety reasons, there would have to be some sort of barrier, a permanent barrier there, so
Yeah.
if
They
it were
did that
crowded.
work without any permits.
Well, I guess that's why I'm
Not a
raising it.
single permit, so they're being issued violations. They have to address it and bring it back to where
Oh,
it
they
has
have
to.
to, okay, well, that would solve the problem then.
Yeah, that's gonna solve the problem, because,
Okay, okay.
and I'm sure the building department's not gonna issue a CO until they resolve and bring that sidewalk back to where it's supposed to be.
Do you know why they raised it up to begin with?
I don't know why they did that. It
Okay.
looks really strange, but you know, the barriers were up there for so long, nobody saw what was going
Yeah.
on until they
Right.
removed
Yeah.
the barriers. And then I said, well, who approved that?
It's a
Because
curb on
that's a
top of a
broken
curb.
leg.
You know, exactly, that's a bad, right.
Yeah, Or a broken neck.
That's the thing, I mean, you fall into traffic, that's a real issue.
Yes, so it's an issue. And we're aware of it. Is there a motion? Motion to pay the bills?
I would move to pay the bills, but I would ask a question,
Sure.
why we're getting invoices from 2021 work so far into 2022.
That was Brightview, that's from Brightview.
Yes, it is.
What happened was, they changed their billing from, they used to bill us through NV5, and then we got contracted directly with them instead of through NV5, and they never issued those bills. We never received them until, and I think they were from December or January, probably December.
Yes.
So they thought
Or even November, I think.
They thought NV5 was issuing the bills, had issued them.
I see.
And they didn't, so then they asked me, well, how come those bills weren't paid? And I said, what bills are you talking about? I never received them. So
So have they gone through and figured out, like, we're not gonna get any more of these that were kind of missed?
we had a discussion
Okay,
about that.
good. That's all I wanna hear, so, I move to approve the bills.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Wait, oh.
All in favor
Wait.
of adjourning?
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
I got a call from the